tension, based on real events. My name is Nurmakamed, from the city of Kentau. This is a story that's been passed down in our family for generations. My grandfather told it often, not to scare us, but so we would remember. He'd say, "Just keep it in mind. You never know when you'll need it." When my father was a boy, strays sometimes wandered into their yard. By morning, an owner always turned up. One evening, a black goat appeared at the gate. No rope, unusually tall, legs a bit too long, and eyes that looked almost human. Father sent his brothers to ask the neighbors. No one claimed it. The next day, it was still there. They tried to drive it off. It would step away, then by dusk return, as if it knew the path back. That night things turned strange. The livestock crowded into one corner, and in the other stood the same goat, only not the same. It rose onto its hind legs, stretching to nearly 2 meters, eyes black with no reflection, hair ragged. Father covered his little brother's eyes but kept watching. The thing vaulted the pen and seemed to dissolve into the dark. In the snow it left hoofprints turned backward, and one goat in the herd was missing an ear, as if bitten clean off. A smell of damp and iron hung in the air, and every time it turned its head, the gate knocked 3 times. In the morning they took my father to the mullah. He opened an old book and said, "That wasn't a goat, it was a jinn wearing a hide." His instruction: "Tomorrow when you drive the herd, one goat will fall behind on its own. Slaughter it, give the meat to the households, and bury the offal where neither dogs nor cats can reach." Father did exactly that. But that very night the jinn returned, gliding over the pen as a breath of furnace heat slid through the cracks. Father began reciting surahs, and before his eyes the dark shape started choking, a tar-thick vapor pouring off it. The recitation lasted nearly 2 hours. When thirst burned his throat and he paused for a heartbeat, the shadows stirred. The air filled again with the smell of wet wool, and from the dark came a rasping etch. The jinn tore free and drifted off like smoke, leaving a hair-thin line of ash along the threshold. From that night on, my father never kept goats, and he never saw it again. But if someone knocks at the gate exactly 3 times, we still don't answer. Next scary story. My grandmother told me this one. It happened in the small Montana town of Cedar Ridge, the kind of place where grown-ups used to lower their voices when certain subjects came up. It's about a young couple. They'd been married a week, living modestly at the edge of town, with an old cottonwood behind the house and open field beyond. One evening the wife said, "Walk me to the outhouse. It's getting dark." The outhouse stood past the tree, a good ways from the back door. Her husband glanced at the sunset. "Go quick. I'll wait on the porch." 20 minutes passed. Nothing. He waited longer. An hour. The wall clock stalled at 9:13 and wouldn't tick. He went to check. The outhouse door was ajar, the seat ice cold, and the air smelled like pond mud. In the dirt were 3 wet prints leading to the cottonwood, and then no more, as if the steps ended midair. When the neighbors came to search, the dogs refused to pass the tree, and lanterns there grew dim with no wind. They searched for days, weeks, months. 2 years later, she was declared missing and life tried to go on. Then one evening, while the family was having tea, the front door opened by itself. She stepped in. Same clothes, same hair, only her eyes were empty, glassy. Without a word, she walked to the bedroom and lay down, like she'd just come home. A smell of damp and iron clung to her, and the hem of her dress carried dry cottonwood fibers, like brittle grass. They sent for Pastor Whitaker. He studied her in silence and finally said, "That is not your wife. What the cottonwood took after sundown has come back, but the soul is long gone." He told them to bury her properly and to approach the grave around the tree, never past it. As the pallbearers went by the yard, the outhouse door knocked 3 times with no wind, and the old neighbor's pocket watch froze again at 9:13. Since then, folks in Cedar Ridge say, don't go past the cottonwood after dark. Some nights the outhouse door scrapes softly, and the tree smells like a pond. Those who've listened swear that at exactly 9:13 you can hear someone breathing there, close, as if they're standing right behind you. Next scary story. My name is Nora. This happened in 2012, up in the mountains of Wyoming near Du Bois, Fremont County. My husband Max and I were tending stock and sleeping in a yurt by a braid of the Shoshone River. No cell service, just wind, stars, and the occasional bark. That night Max shot up. "Something's moving around camp." He pulled on a jacket and stepped out. I stayed with our daughter and Max's younger sister, but I couldn't sleep. The feeling of dread was breathing down my neck. I looked outside, darkness thick as canvas. No husband, no stock. I called, "Max?" and heard his voice from the river. Calm, familiar. "Come here." My watch flickered 3:03, though I was sure it had been closer to 2. The air took on the smell of wet copper. I started walking, not thinking, like my feet already knew the way. I was a few steps from the bank when a shout cracked behind me. "Nora, stop!" I turned. The real Max was a few yards back, pale and winded. By the willows, something withdrew, as if it had crouched there. On the frosted stones, a line of tracks led to the water and then vanished, like the steps ended on a mirror. On a gray boulder, a wet crescent showed, hoof-like, and beside it, a small handprint that had no business being there. Back in the yurt, I told him about the voice. Max nodded and admitted he'd seen a very old woman in a gray cloak at the edge of the light. Her hair hung in long strands like soaked rope. She stood still, then suddenly ran on all fours, quietly with no footfall. He bolted and didn't look back. Later, something tapped 3 times on the tent pole. The wind fell flat, and 2 faint scratches rose on the canvas from the inside, as if drawn by fingers. At first light, we found a ring of tracks around the yurt. Small bare feet and crescent marks like hooves. Both trails ended at the path to the river. A guy line held a little braid of grass, knotted like hair. Since then, we keep the Shoshone rule. After midnight, don't go to the river and don't follow a voice, even if it sounds like the one you love. If something calls from the dark, check the footprints first. Tension, based on real events.